Okay, we've looked at 3 passages of Scripture so far. Matthew 28 and Genesis 1 have shown us God's mission of reproducing, of making new disciples, of expanding His kingdom, going everywhere. We've seen in Deuteronomy 6 that the most important thing, according to Jesus, is loving God, and that parents have that primary responsibility to do that. And so our big win as children's ministers is to set up parents for a win, to teach them how they can teach their children at home. If I can help a single mom, if I can help a preteen mom, if I can help a stepdad, if I can help a deployed dad, if I can help a parent help their child love God, that is the win. All right? Now let's look at one last piece of Scripture, Psalms chapter 78. Psalm 78 is interesting because it is given to the entire people of God, not just to parents. Psalm 78, we don't know who the author is, but it's kind of like a history lesson. And to be honest, most of the chapter is kind of boring. You read it and you're like, oh, Israel did this, and this happened to Israel, and God did this for Israel, and God did this for Israel. And it's not that that's not exciting, but, it's just a bunch of what used to be. Well, the reason that Psalm 78 is recording all of what God did is because they're trying to do something in the listener. And we get that from the first 8 verses. If you check out the first 8 verses of Psalm 78, it's very clear what this chapter is trying to do. It's trying to remind you of what God has done because the future of the next generation is at stake. Let's take a look at the first few verses here. Verse 1 of Psalm 78. My people, listen to my teaching. Pay attention to what I say. I will open my mouth and tell stories. I will speak about things that were hidden. They happened a long time ago. So he's setting you up here. I'm going to be telling you about some history here. Verse 3. We've heard about them. We know them. Our people who lived before us have told about them. You got to remember, this is before the printing press. This is before the internet. Most history was transferred verbally. You literally told stories to recall what God has done. Verse 4. We won't hide them from our children. We will tell them to those who live after us. We will tell them about what the Lord has done that is worthy of praise. We will talk about His power and the wonderful things He has done. He gave laws to the people of Jacob. He gave Israel their law. He commanded our people who lived before us to teach His laws to their children. Then those born later would know His laws, and even their children yet to come would know them, and they in turn would tell their children. See the pattern here, right? It goes from one generation to the other to the other. Why? Verse 7. Then they would put their trust in God. And they would not forget what He had done. They would obey His commands, and they would not be like their people who lived before them. Those people were stubborn. They refused to obey God. Their hearts were not true to Him, and their spirits were not faithful to Him. Now we're going to stop right there, and I'm just going to summarize some of Israel's history. Israel, the people of God, they did not do this. The transference of what God had done from generation to generation to generation, that did not happen. I mean, the Moses generation saw some amazing miracles. The generation that came after that, under the leadership of Joshua, they saw some things. Something happened with that next generation. The Judges generation, the generation that grew up after Joshua, they did not get it. They did not catch it. For whatever reason, they went into apostasy. They started idol worship. I mean, they did not know what God had done. And this is what you and I get to do, because you have a generation that's coming up after you. I don't care how old you are. You could be 80 or 18 or 8 years old. There's somebody younger than you. And God has done something for you that the next generation needs to hear. If they don't hear it, here's what's at stake: the faith of an entire people group. It's what happened in Israel's history, unfortunately, and it's what's at stake in children's ministry today. You and I do so much more than childcare. These verses tell us that what's at stake is the faith of a generation. This is why kids ministry is so important. This is why you volunteering and showing up is so important. You have a job from God to share what God has done for you, so that as they grow up, they will be able to have a firm faith foundation. And I don't care if you're working with nursery kids, preschool kids, elementary kids, preteen kids, they need to hear your story. And obviously the way that you do that will change depending on your gifts and your skill set and which age group you work with. But let me tell you right now, God has done something for your life. It's why you're a Christian today. And kids need to know that. They need to hear, why are you different? Why are you the way that you are? What has God done for you? And when you can retell kids what God has done for you, you are filling the mission that God has given you. So as we go into children's ministry together, I want to encourage you. What you have to do has a scriptural foundation. It is eternally significant. And there is nothing more important that you can do with your time than help the next generation catch the faith that you have today.